Well, good morning, everyone. As always, it's a pleasure to be here on a Sunday morning. Such a beautiful day outside, as Carlos mentioned. My talk today is on obsessions, and Susanna gave me this talk about 6 weeks ago. And I confess, I had a lot of difficulty in where to start and how to get involved with this. In fact, it became almost an obsession, and I really did procrastinate and deliberate. And actually, in reality, it's a bit shameful to say, but I actually only did the talk yesterday. But I think there was a reason for that. I turned it around in my mind many, many times. But when I got into the talk yesterday and I started looking at the incredible amount of material that's available, I just went the whole day from 9 o'clock in the morning till after midnight, with a few breaks for watching a soccer game from England and a few other things. But and I hope, I certainly got a lot out of it, and I hope I can transmit that to you today, what my learnings have been. And the subtitle to the talk that Susanna gave me is also long-term solutions. So it's not just the dark side of obsessions, but also what we can do about it and how we can move on in life. So the way I set up the talk, always I like to reflect, and please bear with me for those who've heard me say some of the things before, but I'm now about 5 years into this path on Spiritism. I think there's a few in a similar position like Veronica here, but I think most of the people here have been involved in Spiritism many, many more years. But it's good to reflect and look back on what I've learned and how much more I have to learn. So I start off with the invitation. And that, again, like preparing for this talk, it's something that I resisted and resisted. Somebody would ask me, come to the centre. I was going through a phase in life where I was getting a little lost, had some bad personal happenings that left me a little bit disturbed. And also, having passed the grand old age of 60, I started thinking, gosh, the inevitable is coming. How long have I got on this planet? And really what's out there for me? So a combination of all that. Eventually I dragged myself to the centre, probably with the help of the spirits as well. And the thing that first attracted me to Spiritism was as we call the three pillars, the science and the philosophy, as well as the religious side of it. And I say that because religion was something that I really avoided all my life. I was sent to Sunday school, Methodist Sunday school in England, until about the age of 10 when I resisted, said, I don't want any more, and finally my mother gave up. And really, for the next 50 years, I had very little involvement with religion. It wasn't through complacency. I think I did have many discussions and many encounters with friends who were religious, a Mormon in particular, Catholic. But I just could not identify myself with any of the established religions. And I think in the talk last week, Robert Blakely brought that out very well about the tolerance for religions and how often so many religions are full of dogmas that really block and create so much conflict in the world. And that was one thing that I took with me all those years. But anyway, I got to the centre, started to learn a bit more, started getting involved with the gospel, and really identified with, the teaching of those first 4 chapters of the New Testament, the gospel. And I hope today I really feel about, there's only one phrase, the golden rule, doing unto others as you want them to do unto yourselves. If we could live that every day, this world would be a lot better place. And then the real milestone came with the talk by Daniel Assisi, amazing character, who I really identified with. The talk was on Allan Kardec, and I learned so much from that. But what I learned more was his way, his approach, but with humour, but with sincerity, with a lot of depth into what he said. And what really resonated with me was the way he called, I've said this before many times, but the way he talked about God as the grand old dude. And that broke down some of the resistances I had about religion and God. And again, I say I never read the Bible, never talked about God, never talked about Jesus, never prayed. So after a few openings, Susanna convinced me to do a talk. And my first talk was bring from my scientific background, my logical way of thinking. I talked about reincarnation and evidence for the spiritual world. And again, that was an eye-opener, because when you really get down to it, there is so much evidence there. I mean, I can't see anybody really who's done the homework and deny that there is a spiritual world. Whether it's through reincarnation, experiences from young children, out of death, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences. There is just so much when you put it all together, so much evidence. And then about 18 months ago, Suzanne invited me to the Mediums group, which I've been participating in, only as a supporting role, but that's been certainly an eye-opener, and again, further proof and evidence to me that the spirits world is out there. And then we get to the influence of spirits, which leads me back to this talk today, and obsessions. And probably of all the aspects, all the different tenets of Spiritism, this is the one that's perhaps a little more difficult to understand and to really grasp and feel what's involved. It's easy to accept that we get influenced by the good spirits, but we also have to be realistic that there are not good spirits out there, that we open the door, we do get influenced by them. So the talk I've structured in the following way. I start off with a definition of obsession and look more at the obsession from a non-spiritist point of view. And then talk about feelings and emotions that generate obsessions. Taken to the extreme, we go to manias and obsessive compulsive disorders, and then we get into the spiritual side of it, and going in through mediumship and how we're all mediums, we're all capturing in some way or some level influence from the spirits around us, and then communications between the two realms, and then finally how can we avoid the bad influences from the obsessors. The sources I used basically, I started off with 2 lectures that were done I think in 2012 in one of the, I think it's the South Florida Spiritist seminar, one with Suzanne and one with Louise, and I've taken a little bit of information from those. I don't want to, I mean, I was wanting to go to the scientific side, and Louis Lima really covers that very, very well, and I couldn't cover it anyway as good as he could. So I've just done I'll talk a little bit about that, but that was a starting point for my thought process. Obviously the Gospel Conspiratism Mediums book, my dear wife Fatima gave me a lot of inspiration. And interestingly enough, and this is why I go back to saying, I only started this talk yesterday, Maria Amelia kindly invited Fatima and herself to dinner on Friday at her beautiful apartment on Hollywood Beach. We arrived on the 21st floor, is it? But anyway, beautiful view, the sun setting over the west and the sea, and we had a lovely dinner. And she also invited Cicero, who she didn't realise was an old friend of Fatima. So inevitably the conversation over dinner got onto Spiritism, and I made the comment that I was doing this talk, and so the rest of the night was talking about obsessors. So I got a lot of information, so that was a great help. Okay, so let's look at the definition of obsession. And I've got a few definitions here, starting from the obsession light to obsession heavy, should we say. So the light is then an activity that someone is very interested in or spends a lot of time doing. At a more deeper level, if someone thinks about something or someone frequently or constantly, especially in a way that is not normal, so we start getting into the heavier side. Persistent, disturbing preoccupation, often with an unreasonable idea of feeling. And then it gets to compulsive preoccupation, unwanted feeling or emotion, and then you get the symptoms of anxiety coming with it. And finally we get into the extreme where it's, you could say sort of a mental illness, a persistent idea or impulse that continually forces its way into consciousness, often associated with anxiety and mental illness. So there's degrees of obsessions, and I think we can all, in some respect, have some form of obsession on the lighter end at the top there. But when you look at human needs, once the basic human needs of food and drink and clothing and shelter have been met, our natural human nature encourages us to explore more, and we get into desires and we start to look for things, usually physical from that, it's a physical desire, physical pleasures. But as those increase, become passions. And passions are good. Passions are what drive us, not necessarily passion in a sense of a love for one person for another, but passions in to develop a talent, a musical talent. I mean, all the geniuses of this world are passionate about what to do. Are they obsessive? It's a fine line between them. So that goes on to obsessions. And then at the extreme end of the scale, end up with the manias. And that is, the compulsive obsessions. So it's all to do with feelings and emotions. That's what's driving us towards this, and it's all to do with I see it as a balance, being just balancing, right, without getting overcome do what is reasonable, what is right. Yesterday I came across this theory of emotions by Robert Plutchik. Do you know this, Sherry? Have you heard? No? He came up with a wheel, and I just like this. I like a bit of colour, so I'm trying to keep it bright. But he talks about the 8 basic emotions, and those are in the centre wheel there, and they're opposites, the bipolar. For instance, joy versus sadness, anger versus fear, trust versus disgust, surprise versus anticipation. And as you go further out, if we look at, say, the yellow spoke at the top there, ecstasy going to joy, going to serenity. Next door to admiration, trust, and acceptance. And the combination of the two, you get into love. And it's really interesting to explore this. There's a whole article about this. But it gave me a little bit of insight about how emotions are so important in our life, feelings and emotions. And that's what's really behind the talk today, the topic of obsessions. So at the extreme end of the scale, there's the manias. And there's literally hundreds of manias. I just pulled out a bit of a list here, starting from A through to E. There's some crazy ones there. Actually, I was looking for Beatlemania, because that was a big one in my day, but it's not there. But it goes through all the way down to Zoomania, which is insane fondness for animals. I think you can put mania on the end of any noun and come up with. Actually, I thought of a couple. Textomania, which I think is a very pertinent today, and Facebook mania as well. Okay, but that's the extreme. So I don't want to get into psychiatry, but I think this is important just to understand how obsessions, again, unwanted, distressing thoughts, mental images, urges, can lead to anxiety. And the anxiety may show itself as distress, fear, worry, danger. And that leads to an action, which is the compulsion. And that can come itself in many, many ways. But any behavior performed to help to relieve that anxiety. That's what we're trying to do. Superstition. A lot of people are still very superstitious. No 13s in their lives, no walking on the ladders, certain colours. And all those, again, those obsessions really result in actions to relieve those anxieties and the compulsions. So obviously the first one, the top to a line, the excessive washing and cleaning and scrubbing of the hands, and checking everything, going over it again. Repeating oneself. Often people have the habits of just doing something that repeats and repeats, and that gives them that bit of stability, but it's a reaction to the obsession they were feeling. And it doesn't have to be physical. Some of the compulsions have been going around in your mind, in your head, and just going round and round and round. And that's how people react. Some people react collecting things, hoarding. I think it was Fernando Marcos, right? The ex-president of the Philippines, who had over 400 shoes. Actually, there must be shoe mania in there too. I didn't sign that one. And then again, a compulsion with organising, arranging, where people can get really so centred on that it becomes compulsive. Okay, so I want to get more now onto the spiritual side, and start off by saying the phrase we often talk about, that we're all mediums to some degree. If we're getting any form of obsession, and it is from the spirits, and majority of times it's not, but if we are receiving, then we're in some form, in some way or means, a medium. And in the medium's book, Kardec sort of classifies all the different levels of mediumship. And I think all of us here are, to some extent, intuitive mediums. We've all had those episodes in life where something happened, you think, wow, I made the right decision there. You look back and think, why did I do that? But I did right, And that was some form of positive receival of the good spirits, your guardian angel, whatever. In the early days, Kardec talked a lot about the physical effects mediums, sensitive, impressionable. It happened to me, because occasionally you just get this strong emotion and you have no idea why. Maybe it's to cry or elation or what, but something right out of the blue hits you. Speaking mediums, and that's what happens in the Personal Mediums group, where our mediums channel the spirits, and the communication is through speaking. A few people have, there's evidence of certain people have seeing capabilities, somnambulistic and healing. But the biggest area of mediumship also is the ethical, which is the mediums like Chico Xavier and Divaldo Franco. And, you know, again, when I was going back to the first talk I did on evidence of the spirit world, when you consider that Chico Xavier didn't have more than 4th grade school teaching and written over 412 books or whatever it is, and amazing complexity. How else could it be? So the other thing about mediumship, I think also, and we've been discussing this in our course on mediums in English on Wednesdays, just a little plug there if you want to come along. It doesn't depend on your mediumistic ability, it doesn't depend on your moral or intellectual advancement. So you could be low moral, low intellectual, high moral, high intellectual. Anyone can be a medium. Okay? And incredibly talented meaning. They use that as a means of gaining money, which is totally wrong. As the mediumship capacities develop, we can develop our mediumship capacity. That's the point I'm trying to make here. And it means study. It means looking at your moral self-awareness. And it may take place over many lifetimes. I'm sure that Chico, I'm not sure, but I've heard that Chico didn't just come in this life as a medium. He was a medium in previous lives, and his mediumistic abilities have been nurtured and grown over his many reincarnations. Okay, so communication between the material and spiritual world. And I'll start off just a little bit about the video of, again, it's available on YouTube. And Luis, in this talk, he talks about thought and how thought actually emanates energy. Talks about two levels of thoughts. The first is radiation thought, which is something like, you know, what am I going to make? What am I going to do for dinner tonight? What am I going to do? A short-lived thought. Okay, but it still sends out an energy. The danger is when we have a longer thought form, as he calls them, which is sustained, particularly in a negative form. It could be positive, it could be negative, but if you continuously thinking, I hate that person, I just can't get on with that person, you start to radiate, and that thought can spread out. And he goes into talking how it creates a mental induction, mental matter, and even goes to particles, and relates that with quantum physics and waveforms. And don't want to go there today, but I was saying there is a lot of, again, scientific evidence of work being done on the effect of thoughts and how it can be approached from a scientific point of view. In Susanna's talk, she, again, a very similar line, but this was from a talk, Obsession and its Mask. And she brings quotes from André Luis. Energy is a divine force that we make use of to add to the divine purpose of our own purpose or purposes. The law of creation will honor our loving creation, executed by the human mind, and will constrain each soul to convert the harm to be done in the good that should be done, because love is the eternal principle that reigns in the entire universe. That is a beautiful phrase. I love that. And she goes on to talk about the mechanisms of mental matter. To think is to create, and every creation has movement and life. This creation, even when brief, brings responsibility to the mind, which is a manifestation of it. Again, we've got to be careful of our thoughts. It's sometimes so easy to think things and, oh, nobody knows, only me. But no, it emanates out. Association brings reciprocal interdependency and reciprocal tendencies. Thought is matter on a new vibratory scale. So again, the message. And this, again, follows in parallel with what Louise was saying. We capture something, we speak about it, it reaches the thalamus gland, which is the center of our mediumistic communications, and goes to the cerebral cortex. So in many ways, it's a parallel with what Louise was saying from a more scientific. This is more from a physiological point of view. Okay, can you just changing the tone a little? Susanna, and actually it's funny that you sent me the link to this video. The next day, Maria Amelia, and so did Cicero. Sorry, but this is a really interesting video. This little short one.
Just can you control the volume?
Yeah. Are we on? It's called Obessions, by the way.
Pois não?
Obsessor.
Hã?
Obsessor. Você não chamou pelo aplicativo? Já cheguei.
Olha, eu não pedi nada não, viu? Deve ser da outra casa.
Mariana, não é?
Como é que você veio parar aqui dentro?
Dentro, fora, morto, vivo, chamei, não chamei. Tudo isso depende de onde você está olhando e o que você quer ver.
Eu quero que você saia da minha casa agora. Eu não consigo abrir.
Você é a dona da chave.
Quer saber? Eu não pedi um obsessor nenhum. Aliás, eu vou até baixar o aplicativo para fazer uma reclamaçãozinha do senhor.
Não vai conseguir. Não é um aplicativo para esse aparelho aí.
Ah, não, pra quê? Pra iPhone?
Para iFilidade. É um aplicativo da vida, que já vem com a gente de fábrica.
O que você tá falando?
Você é igual esse smartphone aí, moça. Ele vibra, você vibra. Ele emite sinais, você emite sinais. Cada pensamento que você tem, atitude, é um sinal que você emite numa frequência. E assim você atrai pessoas nessa mesma frequência. Voa lá. Aqui estou eu.
Então eu ando atraindo um obsessor por aí?
Vejamos. Você é agressiva, mandona, egoísta, trata mal as pessoas, é avarenta, mal educada, quando dá descarga não baixa a tampa do vaso.
Isso atrai um obsessor?
Não, mas eu acho uma porcaria. Espalha germes.
De novo? Só um minutinho. Ué, tem ninguém lá fora? Nem aqui dentro. Deus, eu tô maluca.
Actually, there's a website, Spiritism Online, and there are a dozen videos about obsession, equally as funny, but equally with a very good message. So I think that just sensitizes us to how we can communicate, and what we radiate is what we receive. So let's look at the different ways we can communicate through thoughts. And the most simple way is between two incarnate, where one thinks a thing and the other person receives that. And it can be, just between those two, but if those thought forms get so intense, they can easily spread out to other individuals nearby. I remember the experiment in Washington where a group of transcendental meditators got together over a period of 6 months, and they started off with about 50 people, and the next couple, they met every 2 weeks. And the whole objective is to, through thought, reduce the crime rate in Washington. And it was set up as a real established experiment with criteria and measurement criteria and so on. And over a period of 6 months, the crime rate fell, I think it was about 30 or 40%. Then they stopped and it came back up again. But it did prove, and it proved scientifically, that collective thought can change things for the good or for the bad. But apart from communication obsessions between incarnates, like my little spirit friends here, it also happens in the spirits world. And it can be obsessions between spirits, and we have experience of this sometimes in the mediums meeting, where a spirit comes and is being obsessed by another spirit. And it's similar to, as in the incarnate world, it happens between spirits. But the most thing we're talking about today is obsessions from the incarnate world to the spirit world and vice versa. All starts with a thought. So again, be careful with your thoughts. Just talk a little bit about some of the classification of obsessions. In fact, the word obsession, obsessor, is actually just a technical term in Spiritism. It's not in the dictionary. There's no such thing as obsessor. But obsession and obsessor are really technical terms and related to Spiritism. I came across actually a very good page. Even in Wikipedia, there's a whole page about Spiritism, obsession in Spiritism. And I only came across it this morning before I checked it. There was some good information in there. So the base level simple obsession is something that we're aware of, we can guard against, and it's just perhaps an inconvenience. Over our dinner discussion on Friday, Cicero came up with one that he experienced. He said one day he just had the tremendous urge to smoke. He'd never smoked all his life. And he said it just this incredible urge to smoke. And the only explanation you can get, he was being influenced by an obsessive spirit. And I think, I don't know if anybody else has got any examples like that, but I'm sure we all have. The next level of obsession is fascination. And this can be dangerous. It's much more serious. It really starts to paralyze your own judgments and choices. And, you know, led as we're being blind. I think an example I found here was perhaps Hitler, where Hitler was able to, and again, this is incarnate, but to influence others to atrocious acts, which if they step back, they, you know, would never do. But because it was built in this whole fascination and obsession, that it spread, and you know, we all know the results. And the final, most serious level is subjugation. Where literally, it paralyzes the will. And this is something that doesn't happen very often, I don't think. I hope I don't have any experience, or I know anybody that's in that level. So, you know, paralyzed will acts in spite of himself. It's just a state of absolute bondage, so the spirit really overtakes all the decision functions of the poor individual, the medium. So let's get on to the good news. There is a solution. And step one, I think, is basically, as we said, watch what you say, watch what you think, watch what you say. Don't think that nobody knows what I'm thinking. It's not going to have an effect. It does have an effect. Spiritism is a great source of, of learning. And the more we learn, the more we put into practice the good thing that Spiritism teaches us, the more we will create a barrier to evil, the bad intentioned spirits. Always be vigilant. Be aware that this can happen to you, can happen to anyone. Next step is to know thyself, go into oneself. Because, again, an obsessed will never come to visit you unless you open the door in some way. It always starts within oneself. So by knowing oneself, knowing one's weaknesses, knowing one's strength is so important. And go to that, hopefully, inner transformation, which is developing your good morals, virtues, recognizing that we have some vices and what you can do about them to eliminate them. Receiving passes is a cleansing, has a cleansing function. Just by coming every week to the centre, receiving passes, clearing your mind, you're getting to get more involvement with the good spirit and develop that love. Perseverance, this is so important as well. You know, it's not something you're going to be, something you can change from one day to the next. It's something you have to work on continuously. And last step, prayer. Always be aware that the good spirits are with you, and don't be afraid of asking for assistance, guidance. So, what can one do to heal from obsession? In any process of obsession, the cure remains in a conduct that corresponds to the cosmic ethics. It is reforming oneself intimately. It is also important to find a spirit center wherever possible so as to receive an energetic healing and guidance in order for the obsessing spirit to receive assistance through specific treatments. Spiritist centers are well informed about this subject and systematically dedicate themselves, among other things, to helping in these sort of situations. However, the cure depends mostly on the obsessed spirit conduct and on the effort one makes for one's own growth and illumination. This is the key. This is the key. Again, it starts with us. Don't pass the luck to the obsessor. When one is able to develop love in one's feeling, making it present in one's attitudes, the vibratory band will be elevated and the tuning previously held with the obsessing spirit will be lost. This is very important because the persecution is carried out with a feeling of revenge, and the persecuted of today was the executioner of yesterday. There is a karmic debt to be settled. In these cases, the best way to settle is obtaining the forgiveness of the obsessing spirit and in helping him to find the way to his own spiritual growth. And finally, I want to go back to the Spirit's book and this short answer to question 479 about prayer. Prayer is always an efficacious means of obtaining help, but you must remember that muttering of certain words will not suffice to obtain what you desire. God help those who help themselves, but not those who limit their action to asking for help. It is therefore necessary for the obsessed person to do his utmost to cure himself of the defects which attract obsessing spirits to him. And with that, I thank you for your patience.
Susanna's going to ask you a question.